Dan, Karen, what do we got going on in the fiberglass area?
Well, today is Friday Fiberglass, or Fiberglass Friday. So we're working on all sorts of fiberglass projects today. It's a good time to do it in the winter when we can put a boat in here and leave it in for a long while, because this takes a lot of time and it requires a lot of shop time here, and normally we don't like to tie the shop up with one boat because it'll keep us from fixing many boats. So over here we've got an old Bertram. This is a 50-year-old Bertram that had a rotten transom. When they lay these boats up, at least when this boat was built, they basically had a boat that had 1.5 inches of plywood, and it was in between two courses of fiberglass. Fiberglass on the outside, fiberglass on the inside. And so what we did is we cut this piece of transom all the way off. We took out all the rotten wood, and then we put this piece of fiberglass back on without any filler in here. And then we poured a special transom compound called carbon core. And what that is it's a ceramic resin that makes a monolithic solid block. You can feel it, you can hear it when you hear. It's as solid as can be. So why did this transom rot? It rotted for several reasons. First of all, water gets in there, gets into the wood inside, and what happens is the wood over time will break down and rot, and when you do, you lose all your strength in your transom. Eventually, if it's not taken care of, this boat will sink. It'll leak to the point where it'll sink unless someone's paying attention to it. Usually what happens, we replace a lot of transoms every year, and usually the root cause of transom repair is because someone's drilled holes in this for a variety of reasons, whether it's a transducer or to add something or to take something off it. They've never filled the holes properly. Lots of times they'll just stick a little 5200 in there or some caulk, and they think that's all they have to do. When the reality is when you drill a hole in here, you pull something out, you've got to re-drill the hole, clean the hole out, get down to good material, and then you have to fill it with some sort of epoxy filler. In this particular case, right here we have cockpit scuppers. They have to be drilled through now, but there were cockpit scuppers here, and they went all the way through the transom to drain water out of the cockpit. But inside in this hole, the inside, the wood was exposed to the water. They never sealed it properly around here, so the water started getting into here, and when it freezes and thaws, it warms up. In the winter it freezes, and when it freezes, the water expands, splits the wood apart, leaves a bigger void there for more water to get in. So we had water coming in from this one and from this one over here, and then there was a crack down in here. It looks like it had been repaired at some point in time. So we fixed that all up. We put this piece back on, we poured the carbon core, and now today, later on, I'm going to put in some synthetic material up here and put this last piece of fiberglass in. The material I'm using is Kusa. And what is Kusa? It's a synthetic board. We don't use any board now that can rot. This is a synthetic board. It's made of resin and fiberglass fibers. You can see them in here. And this is as strong as can be when it's laminated with fiberglass cloth, resin and cloth. It's rock hard. This material will not absorb any water at all, ever. So you don't have to worry about it being exposed to water. You don't have to worry about it being exposed to freeze-thaw cycles. It stays solid forever. This is a modern day boat building material. It's replaced plywood in most installations. All of the good manufacturers, the good premium boat manufacturers, are using Kusa or some other material. So that's my project later today. We'll cut a few pieces of Kusa. We'll put them in here. We'll laminate them in with a fiberglass cloth on both sides. We use a cloth that looks like this over here. This is just a random weave cloth, and we use this cloth. It acts as a bonding agent with the resin that we apply. It acts as a bonding agent. It helps fill in any inconsistencies, but it helps adhere this piece to the fiberglass underneath it. Here's another project we're working on today. This is the deck hatch off a Whaler Montauk. And the older Whaler Montauks are notorious for having fuel tank failures. So when we pulled this piece off to replace the fuel tank, we found that the wood that was reinforcing this fiberglass was absolutely totally rotten. And it added about 50 pounds of weight to the boat but it also was rotten to the point where the deck was getting spongy. So rather than put this back on, we decided that the best thing for us to do would be to pull all the old wood off, relaminate it. Again, we're going to use Kusa here. We made this piece of fiberglass decking. I've got clamps holding it here and here, all the way around it. And if we pull the clamps off, this is like a wet noodle. It completely loses its shape. So the Kusa was going to give it some shape. So what I had to do was to build a frame here that's level. It's all on the same plane. And then what we will do is we will pull this cloth off. We will cover it with resin. We'll lay this cloth back down. And then we'll cover this with resin until it's saturated. We'll take our piece of Kusa. I have a piece there. It's already cut out for the perforations. It's already been in there. We templated all of this. Cut the holes out where all of these through deck hatches are. And we're just finishing the last piece up here. You can see how there's no clamp on here. And you can see how this is not flat. So before we put this in, we'll clamp it down, we'll straighten it out, we'll flatten it so that we have a nice piece of flat fiberglass to go back in. After we laminate this back in underneath, we will again go back on top and we'll seal the top with another layer of this glass and some more resin. As for resin, we're using vinyl ester resin. There's 3 types of resin you can use to do this kind of repair. You can use epoxy, you can use polyester resin, or you can use vinyl ester resin. Polyester is the cheapest resin. It's not the best. It is used in a lot of boats for boat building, but I won't use vinyl ester resin, or polyester resin, excuse me, because it will allow some water absorption, and it's the cheapest to use, but it's not the best to use. For a repair like this, I prefer to use vinyl ester resin, which is a cross between epoxy and polyester resin. It has really good properties to keep water from penetrating. It has a little bit more flex in it than epoxy does, which means it won't be so brittle and it will allow it to flex better with the boat. And the working time is relatively short. The problem with vinyl ester resin is it's more expensive than polyester. Actually quite a bit more. A gallon of this material costs about $100. And just to do this lamination, just the first coat, not the second one on top, we're going to use over a gallon of resin just to do this. Now today we'll put this up. We'll finish fitting this. We'll laminate all this today so that tomorrow I'll be able to put the final coat of glass on it. Then we just need to trim it up and clean it up and it'll be done.
Cool. Thanks.
Now you